Welcome back everyone to another Warframe video, and whoo boy do we have a very spicy topic to discuss today. So as of this recording, there was a dev stream a little while ago that talked about self-damage and AOE weapons and their overall where they're at and what needs to change and why it needs to change. And I want to go over the 3 things that DE talks about in this stream on why they nerf something. And I want you to keep these 3 things in mind while moving forward in this discussion. Number 1, is it disrupting people's play? Now this one I think is a little bit different than what it used to be before the ammunition changes and headshot changes, but I think it still relatively holds true, at least for a vast majority of people. It is incredibly disruptive. Unless you are one of the people actively doing this and just spamming AOE with prime sure-footed or jumping around the map and just carpet bombing the entire room and killing everything in the room, you're kind of ruining the fun for everyone. And I'll be 100% honest, I left a comment on someone else's video covering this topic saying how we all saw this coming, we all knew it was going to happen, and it needed to happen. And I was actually quite surprised to see the amount of comments saying that it was a lot of fun, they shouldn't get rid of it, it was the most effective way. And I gotta say, while yes, all of these things are true, it is fun, it is effective, and it is the most popular, that does not mean it's not disruptive. Not everyone wants to run around just jump spamming the shit out of everything and carpet bombing a whole room and one-shotting everything in a single room. Yes, it's a power fantasy, and I have even said so in my last debate video talking about this stuff. What I don't agree with is how much it's disrupting people who don't have access to this or simply don't like AOE weapons. Now, me personally, I love the Brahma, but when it started being the only thing that people used, it kind of stopped being fun because it was just, like I was saying, it's nothing but that. Less so now, but it's still very prominent. You go into any exterminate or any carpet bomb situation, that's exactly what people are going to do. They're going to be running that kind of stuff. I even got a comment or reply from someone telling me, if you don't like it, then just play solo or with your own friends. In a multiplayer co-op game, you want me to remove myself from the situation so you can have fun at a party that's meant for everyone. That's kind of one-sided and not fair. Not to mention, it's not the only thing that works in the game. It's not like they're nerfing something that is the only effective method or the only way to get things done. It's just kind of, without lack of a better word, it's grossly overpowered and it's frustrating as hell. Now I'm gonna go over the 3rd thing that they list off because I feel it more falls in line with what I was just saying earlier. The 3rd thing they talk about is it dominant? And yes, that is absolutely true. I mean, they've even shown the numbers where, for example, like when the Hellman system was first introduced, they showed a chart of what abilities were being used over others, and there was a huge discrepancy. Now, yes, there's a huge debate about all of that for the Hellman system where things need to be buffed or debuffed or tweaked or adjusted because some things are just crap while others are ridiculously good. This is a little bit of a different situation. This is simple weapon use, and a lot of people get the idea that because it's AOE, it has to be really good at what it does. And to an extent, I agree with that. Here's why it's ridiculously overpowered. There is no drawback for using it. There is not a single drawback for using it. And the only drawback they have in the game is self-stagger. And they themselves took that out when they provided us with prime sure-footed. They could have avoided this problem altogether if they had not given that mod the capability to stop self-stagger. And when they talked about changing it to where prime sure-footed wouldn't affect self-stagger, the community was in this uproar like, oh my god, this is the worst idea you've ever had kind of thing. A little bit of exaggeration there, but you get the point. People were very just not happy about this. The problem is, yes, people are going to be unhappy about it. Like it's kind of a expected reaction when you take something that is so ridiculously good, give them the ability to keep using that for such a long time, and then take it away. Of course they're going to be upset. And the way I see it is, quite honestly, it needs to go. There needs to be some kind of change. They're talking about these changes. More on that later. But of course people are going to be upset with how long and how much investment people have been using and improving this method. A lot of people have stated it's a self-inflicted problem, and I 100% agree. I'm not debating that was not self-inflicted, because it clearly was. They let the problem get this bad themselves, and then they let it go for so long. But I'd like to get to the third thing they talked about. And this one was largely mitigated, but I still think there's a lot to talk about here. The last thing, which was technically the second thing on the list, was, is it automated? Now, they largely removed that with Wukong being pretty heavily nerfed. I mean, they made him do 50% less damage, he uses your ammunition, and he's just overall a lot less effective. And the reason they did this is because he was automated. You could just summon him and he would do the mission for you, any sort of defense mission, especially with AOE weapons. Like, it was ridiculous how effective he was at that and how long he had been able to do that. Another example of them taking way too long to respond to an issue that should have been resolved when it first cropped up, because people invested a lot of time in that and now they're upset that it's gone. Though I am glad it's gone. Now, the other big thing I want to talk about, which is I honestly think a little bit more nuanced than just pure automation, but hear me out here. What I talked about at the beginning was it was really easy for people to do. You get prime sure-footed, you get a frame that has no stagger like Gauss's 2 or Atlas being completely unstaggerable while he's on the ground, and you just go nuts. You just start carpet bombing the room and going absolutely ballistic, and no one can stop you. Nothing can stop you, really, even in Steel Path missions. Now, I ask you, doesn't that seem a little bit automated, where you just jump in the air, shoot a single shot, and kill everything in a room? Or perhaps, does that sound way too similar to something or several things they took out in the past? Let's go over some of those, shall we? Now, I know there's a lot of new people that play Warframe, and I don't want to discount that. I know that there's a lot of people that are still getting into it. Some people stopped playing for a long time and just came back. So we're going to go over some of the things that have happened in the past, so people who don't know this, or remind people who have been out of it for a while as to what these kinds of things entail, and why it should have been obvious that this was going to change eventually. Now, I started playing this game really, really early on, didn't like it too much, and then came back sometime later, sometime after, and it wasn't long after they got rid of the stamina bar. It was sometime after that I started playing. Now, at this time, the most prominent method for a long time was maiming strike, slide attacks, and melee as a whole. Now, what I mean by this is maiming strike back then was ridiculously good. You could get really good critical on slide attacks. Range worked very differently, so it would only work really well for weapons that were ridiculously long. It was percentage based, and weapons that were really short, just obviously because it was percentage based, they didn't get the same kind of bonuses. What this meant is people were running around with really long weapons, whips, whatnot, and they were just spamming slide attack, going absolutely nuts with the spin to win meta is what that was. It was the spin to win meta, and it was pretty much the only thing people used for a long time. Another example of something that went far too long, but at this time the game was still heavily evolving. So what did they do to mitigate this? They nerfed maiming strike, and they made it to where melee couldn't pass through walls. Now, at the time, this was a really big deal because melee was the go-to, and this was long before any of the scaling adjustments to high-level enemies. There was also no steel path, no arbitrations, nothing like that. So it was definitely a very different time, but with this example, you can kind of see a trend going. Now, the next example I would like to cover is the Ton Core, and this was before, like long before they even touched AOE weapons to be self-stagger instead of instant die self-damage. This weapon at the time had really good stats, and it had the one thing that people really needed to stop themselves from becoming part of the Tenno Space program, and that was minimum safe arming distance. It would not blow up unless it was a certain distance away, so if it hit a wall too close or an enemy too close, it would simply bounce off and do nothing. But this was the only AOE weapon in the game that could do it, and it became the most popular method, because it was, like it is now, it was incredibly difficult to kill yourself with that weapon. Then they nerfed it for the exact same reasons that they're nerfing it now. Another set of rapid fire nerfs that they did, they had the Ignis Wraith, the Telos Bolte, Saren however many times, Limbo, the time that they nerfed Volt, Mag, and Excalibur because of a single Venus node and had to completely undo that because people were really unhappy. Lots and lots of examples of them changing things because it's too effective at nuking an entire room. So to cap this video off, I want to go over some of the changes that they talked about. Now, take this next part with a grain of salt. They talked about this as what they're internally testing. They made it abundantly clear they don't have a definitive solution yet. They are just letting us know that they are working on things and that they will get back to us when they have a solution that they are either ready to present or are ready to implement. So what they had said was they're internally testing self-damage coming back, and the exact numbers or behavior of that is is not 100%. They're not entirely sure on it yet. Like I said, they're still internally testing. But the way Pablo described it is it's going to be self-damage, but it's going to be percentage of your health, not percentage of the weapon's damage. So you won't have people like Banshee dying instantly and Inaros barely surviving or anything like that. So the closer you are, the more percentage damage it's going to do directly to your health. And they also talked about how the AOE for the actual explosion and the self-damage radius are going to be two completely different things, where you have to be closer to the AOE than enemies do for yourself to get hurt versus the enemies that are in range. Now, I know there's going to be a lot of people that are immediately not happy with this, but I mean, what else can they do? I would like to know what you guys think in the comments. What else can they do to improve this system? Because people are already so against self-stagger being reintroduced as something that you can't avoid. So I'd like to hear your thoughts, what exactly they could change to make this better. But remember, they're changing this because not only is it a pattern of behavior for them, but it needs to change. Whether people like it or not, it's just too good. It's too effective. And I'm personally very sick of seeing it. I'd like people to actually use different weapons or allow us to have fun, so we're not sitting there just walking through a room full of burnt to crisp enemies and nothing to do besides walk the whole mission like it's some kind of walking simulator. But that's gonna be it for this video. Let me know in the comments what you guys think about all this, what they could do, what they could change, what they shouldn't change. And if you liked it, hit that like button. If you want to see more content like this, hit that subscribe button, and I will see you guys in the next video.